Appreciate everybody showing up today. I hope that everybody had a good and easy time getting into the presentation. My name is Vaughn Lawrence. I'm the Director of Communications and Technology here at PAMIC. Today we're going to be focusing on branding the modern mutual. This is actually a really interesting topic, and I'm excited to cover it. It's something that came out of our Marketing and Communication Committee, and we have two great presenters today. But before we start, I just wanted to take some time to thank our sponsors. We have premium gold sponsors who help to support our education throughout the year, and those sponsors are Baker Tilly, Donegal, Genry, Guy Carpenter, Markham, Munich Re, Hartford Steam Boiler, Mutual Boilery, Pennsylvania and Indiana Lumbermans, Swiss Re, and Willis Re. And beyond our webinar education, we do have a couple of other events coming up here pretty soon. On June 14th, we're going to be hosting our executive and board roundtable at the Albany Bedford Springs, and we're going to be hosting our convention in August from the 5th to the 7th at the Baltimore Waterfront Marriott. And that should be an interesting event because we're going to be hosting it with the Maryland Association, West Virginia Association, and the Virginia Association. So that should be a great event to get out to. We hope to see you guys all at our in-person events as well. Now I'd like to introduce our presenters. Today we're going to be having Randy Fulmer and Chris Orrell. Randy is from Donegal. He currently serves as the Assistant Vice President Manager of Marietta Marketing. He oversees a field staff calling on agents in Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Delaware. He and his staff provide Donegal appointed agents in those states with regular updates on insurance product offerings, systems training, and sales and business development strategies that will benefit both the agent and Donegal. Prior to his current position, Randy worked as a territory sales manager for Southeastern and South Central Pennsylvania. He holds a CIC designation for the National Alliance and graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration from the Westchester University. Then we have Chris. He oversees agency relations for the Philadelphia Contribution Ship. He's an interesting presenter because his company actually just went through a rebranding process, and they just have to be the oldest insurance company in America. So it's interesting to hear his perspective on that. So he oversees the agency relations and marketing for the Contribution Ship. Recently, his focus on it has been refreshing and managing that brand. And before joining the Contribution Ship, he served as the Director of Business Development for Quaker Special Risk and the Senior Vice President for the Weichert Insurance Agency. And right before we begin here, I just want to let everybody know that all the materials from today's webinar are going to be available on our website afterwards. There is a Q&A button that you can ask any questions throughout the presentation, and we'll try to address those as quickly as possible. And if anyone has any technical difficulties, feel free to email me at vlawrence@pamic.org. And now I'm going to hand it over to Chris.
Great, thank you, Vaughn, and good morning, everybody. I'm going to start by talking a little bit about our process here at the Contribution Ship, and Randy and I will be available for a little back and forth as we get to the end of the slides. So the first step in developing a campaign and developing a process of trying to get our brand out there. We know we have formidable competition when it comes to trying to get into the headspace of potential insurance buying consumers. So developing our goals is the place we started. Next. So our goal was to build upon our rich history. As Vaughn mentioned earlier, I'm sorry, my Apple phone is going off at exactly the wrong moment. Apologize for that. You know, we've been around since 1752. So as the oldest successful insurance company in the country, we're entering a new evolution on the insurance business. I think most of us in this business have seen how the dynamics of distribution have changed fairly dramatically. So one of the things that we recognized was, while we're maybe the oldest company in the country, we had kind of an old, tired brand. Most people, if they saw our logo, wouldn't even know who we were. So we went about a process actually just almost a year ago, a little over a year ago, of trying to refresh our brand and bringing it kind of into the new millennium. And so whether you're rebranding or simply taking steps to try to, kind of enhance your existing brand, we're going to go through a couple of different scenarios that I think can apply to both. Next. So in starting a strategy and building goals and trying to get your arms around, where are we and where do we want to go? The first step that we took was to try to get an understanding of who our customers are. And look, you can slice and dice this 1,000 different ways. We happen to operate like many regional or local mutual companies in a tight geography. So our 5 states are Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland. And after our brand launch, we actually moved in and launched our programs in the Commonwealth of Virginia. But looking at our current distribution of policyholders, we took a demographic approach and looked at, how do they slice up in terms of age. And so the graphic in front of you is kind of an internal evaluation of our current policyholder demographics. This is now a little over 1.5 years old, but it's fairly representative, I think, of where we are today. So knowing your customers is the first step. Next. And then not only knowing who they are, but trying to predict and understand their buying behavior. So we took this outside of our own. So we did some surveys working with a branding company. You don't have to spend a ton of money on this kind of stuff, but I strongly recommend. We're insurance people, and some of us like to think that we're marketing gurus, but in reality, we're insurance people. And so we went outside the company and engaged the services of a branding company. And there are a lot of different firms that are out there that can offer different types of services. But since we were refreshing our brand, finding a high quality branding company was a way to go. And so we used them to actually expand our survey process to include insurance buyers, that some of which were our customers and some of which had no relationship with the company. As you can see here, there's a pattern that starts to develop over time. And you can see these percentages as well as I can, so I'm not going to read them to you. But the category of other, which can include a whole mixed bag of things, is definitely more prominent in the younger folks. And you can see the online actually is higher in the 30 to 49 quadrant than it is, even the 18 to 29. But we recognize that customers' buying behaviors do differ generationally. And so if we're going to design a strategy to try to build brand awareness and brand recognition, we have to recognize how people buy and how they like to get and give information. So the survey process for us was one that was helpful and directional in terms of some of the activities we were going to embark upon as we started to evolve our branding strategy. Next slide. So continuing along the same theme of getting to know your customers and what are customer decision drivers. So again, part of our surveying process, again, conducted by our branding company, threw out a whole bunch of things, and these are kind of the top group of responses that we got. And so focusing on them and understanding that this group is looking for certain attributes. Obviously, big smile on our face when we saw established company with long history. That one specifically plays to who we are. But this was actually, again, the branding company that did this particular survey. So this included not just our clients, but folks that are not with us. And you can see how it's kind of scales down as you go through the priority list of what people think are important. Again, helping us kind of frame what we think is, where would we invest our dollars? Would we necessarily invest a lot of dollars in an app to manage the policy? Well, if it's down in the 19% range, probably not. But then you got to balance that off of, well, what's the cost of doing that? And if the cost is minimal and you still have close to 20% of people that are interested in that particular capability, you kind of have to keep that in mind. So it's not just looking at the numbers and saying, oh, the only ones that matter are at the top. It's kind of evaluating the percentage of responses, favorable responses to any of these kind of decision drivers, and then figuring out, well, how does that fit into my budget? How does that fit into my strategy? And some of the other things that we're doing, and all of you may be doing with your companies. And then reacting to that in a way that is focused, as is the case with all of us. I think we don't have the marketing and advertising budget of a Geico or an Allstate or State Farm or any of those other companies that continue to drive the commoditization of our business, which I'm sure drives you nuts and certainly drives me crazy. So we have to spend our money wisely and in a focused and deliberate manner. Next slide. So turning what you know into what you need to do. I started to talk a little bit about this earlier. Who are your current customers and who do you want your future customers to be? Knowing how they buy, know what's important to them, and then based upon that, you can, again, all of us, again, working for companies that don't have an unlimited budget, develop your campaigns and action items so you can develop a plan that you can actually execute upon. No sense building $1 million marketing campaign if you've got $1.85 in your pocket. So got to kind of line things up with the reality of your business. Next slide. So creating an action plan. Next. So we kind of have taken a three-part approach to this. Again, if we had this unlimited budget of Geico, State Farm, Allstate, and others, we would probably lean more heavily on traditional advertising and trying to get our message would be one of financial stability and quality and kind of the themes around value over, give us 15 minutes and save 15% or some crazy horse hockey like that. But traditional advertising is can give you a broader appeal. And what we're looking for is obviously to keep that in our budget. We've done some on-air radio, very targeted and focused in a couple of our marketplaces. If nobody knows what OOH means, then you're not alone, because I didn't know what that meant either until I met with some people that do billboards. But that's out of home advertising. You got to have an acronym for everything, guys. So out of home advertising could be billboards, could be bus shelters, could be actually wrapping in buses, depending on your interest and your maybe your history or your culture around doing certain things in the public. We did something with trade publications are also great, and for us that's a great example of an opportunistic situation for us. As we launched in Virginia, we had been talking with the folks at Rough Notes, a publication I expect everybody on this call knows, and we wanted to get some information out to the marketplace about where we're now open in Virginia. So we took a little ad space in Rough Notes. I think we ran an ad in there, maybe a 3/4 page ad for 6 months, so one every other month. And the feedback that Rough Notes got led them to reach back out to us and actually want to do an article on us. So can't remember the month. I want to say it was October of last year, but I'm embarrassed to say I don't remember the month. But they wrote a really nice article titled "Everything the Old is New Again," which kind of ties into our whole brand thing. So you can do some spend on certain things, and then you find out that there's interest that develops actually opportunities to get the word out. And I thought the article was even better than the ads, and we didn't pay a dime for the article. So it's getting creative around traditional advertising, because again, none of us have the budgets to compete with the big dogs at the top of the slide. Next. Another part of our three-part strategy is again, focused on trying to get our word out in a variety of different mediums. And digital, I'm sure everybody's heard digital a bazillion times. Digital is becoming a more usable and is a more cost-effective tool. So we're based here in Philadelphia, as our name would suggest. We partnered with KYW and WIP to do some live streaming. So believe it or not, the radio stations that sell ad space to their advertisers have an on-air public airwaves set, if you will, of programs and costs and bits that they can do for you in terms of over-the-air radio, which would be the traditional. They also double down and can double dip actually and use that streaming of the same live program but over the internet, and ad buys on their streaming services are exceptionally less expensive. And it was a nice boost for us last year, as those of you who follow football know, with the Eagles' triumphant win in their first Super Bowl last year. WIP is the kind of exclusive broadcaster of Eagles football games. So we had a lot of people listening online to WIP during football season, and when we had we got greater visibility as a result of the success of the football team here in Philadelphia. Not sure this works as well in Cleveland as it does here, but it was a nice boost for us, and hopefully will be again this year when Mr. Wentz is back under center. Some other things, though, in terms of digital search engine optimization, search engine marketing, we're just starting to put our toe in the water on these things. What you're trying to do there is maximize your impressions per dollar, and you're trying to elevate your name and your brand on search engine when somebody's going online and wants to find somebody relative to insurance or types in insurance, you're hoping to float up on the first page, and that's what SEO and SEM are kind of all about. We also have events that occur on top of mind issues, whether it's the massive flooding that we all saw last year, where we were able to get some messages out digitally pretty quickly. That's another nice thing about digital. You can turn them electronically and put them out almost the same day you come up with them. So getting messages out quickly on these topical issues that will resonate with buyers, and then hopefully get them to click and come and visit your site and learn more about you. So digital is something that we're going to continue to invest in and is an integral part of our three-part strategy. So on the next slide, I'm going to kind of use this one to transition and give Randy a chance to jump in, but I'll touch on it briefly. So Vaughn, if you could go to the next slide, please. The third part of our kind of three-part branding strategy, marketing strategy, brand awareness, you can call it whatever you like, is to really get out into the local marketplace. Now, we distribute all of our products through a network of independent agents. My hunch is that's the case with most of you. So we reach out into our 5 different jurisdictions, 5 states. Actually, we have it whacked up into 7 different regions. And each of our territory sales managers are responsible for knowing what's going on in their local marketplaces and how people in central Pennsylvania will respond to messages very differently than people in northern New Jersey, as an example. The demographics are kind of different. So we work in concert with our distribution system, which is our independent agents, to figure out, what do the residents in your town respond to? What would get them to show up and learn a little bit about your agency? And if we decide to partner together, which is where the cooperative participation comes in, where we could kind of showcase both of our brands and both of our messages as partners together. And we find that you don't have to spend a ton of dough to get involved in whether it's a local music festival or any kind of community-based events that where the beneficiary of the event is the local community charity or some sort of initiative that's important in that local community. You're getting out there in the community. Look, and this involves work. It involves oftentimes working on weekends and, overnights and away from your families and that kind of stuff. But if you really care passionately, as we do, about partnering with your local agents, this is the kind of stuff that you need to do. And I know, I'm going to transition over and give Randy a chance to jump in here. Grassroots is kind of where you're belly to belly with your distribution system. So if you can get one lead, but you spent an entire afternoon with some of your best agents in kind of a fun and engaging environment, I still maintain this is a people business, and people generally want to do business with people that they like. And so if you can do more of those kind of activities that bring you together as friends and as partners with your distribution partners, you have a much better chance of getting the brand out there and delivering those messages. So with that long diatribe, which went a little longer than I expected, I want to turn it over to my friend Randy for perspective that he has and some of the things that the folks at Donegal have been doing on this initiative as well. Randy?
Yep. Well, thanks, Chris. And I do want to thank everybody for taking some time to join us on the call and on the webinar today. This is a topic that's kind of near and dear to my heart, and I think to all of our hearts, is that brand awareness, and it's a lot of the topics that Chris talked about earlier. He covered a lot of the basics of what I was going to talk about. I'm going to give you some background on maybe a little more specifics and some ideas as to maybe a little more detail on some of the things we've done and some of the approaches that we take at Donegal to do this. So, Vaughn, with the next slide. As Chris already introduced this concept of grassroots marketing or community-based marketing, I would echo a number of the points that he made, that none of us, most of us on the call, maybe all of us on the call, do not have the resources to compete with the big national carriers. I jokingly say that some of them have larger advertising budgets than we have written premium. But I feel that, as much as Chris does, that we can effectively compete with those organizations at the community level by doing this grassroots marketing, by selectively perhaps engaging in some corporate sponsorship to get your brand out locally, to partnering, as Chris alluded to, with your local distribution force, what we call co-op advertising, where we share some costs on some things as partners. And one of the other pieces I'm going to touch on briefly is the employee engagement piece from your company's perspective. I think that's a growing area of engagement here that I think we need to be aware of. So next slide, please. Next slide, Vaughn. Yeah, I mentioned that competing with the national carriers, and Chris, we don't have a Mayhem or a Flow or, maybe some of those unlimited resource dollars. But I think selectively in your local communities, you can compete with them. And to one of Chris's points, I still believe people buy from people they like, people they know, generally. And the more we can do to keep it that kind of a relationship, I think the more effective we're going to be. If we do more things to create it and commoditize it, as our national friends do and some of our direct writers do, that we lose that connection. So I think the more you can engage your local, your targeted customers, the more effective you're going to be. I also talk about advertising a lot as brand awareness, as much as I do maybe driving sales. Some of the things that we've done in the past, co-op wise with our agents, they've really come back and said, well, the phone didn't ring enough, or we didn't get enough leads out of that. And I think some of that's the misperception that's out there. There is some activities that drive actual sales, but I think a lot of it is just brand awareness and making sure the consumers are aware of your brand in the local areas. I tell the story of traveling out into the western part of the state with one of my salespeople and trying to engage an agent in some advertising discussion. And they were of the mindset that they'd been in the community for 75 plus years and everybody knew them and they didn't need to do that. And I casually mentioned to my agency partner that, well, you know, as I was driving in town today, I saw a lot of people that aren't anywhere near 75 years of age, and they may not know what you do. So I think brand awareness is key in making sure your consumers and your target market understands who you are and what you do and recognizes that brand or that logo when it pops up somewhere. Much to Chris's conversation pieces, we've used a multi-pronged approach as well. We've dove into the social media area with you know, Facebook posts and some other digital marketing things that we're doing with one of our advertising firms with our agency partners. We certainly do the traditional media. We've done some radio spots, some TV spots, some billboards. In the old days, we used to do a lot of inserts in newspapers, but that's gone by the wayside. I don't think a lot of people even get newspapers anymore. And I think there's also that little giveaway piece, which again, you can get some really neat little things that don't cost a ton of money, but it's all centered around this idea of making people aware of your name and what you do. Next slide. Again, Chris mentioned corporate sponsorships. I think to the degree your budget will allow, these are growing areas of interest. I think we're probably all bombarded with requests for money, whether it's a golf outing or the high school or Little League or any of those types of things. So one of the strategies that we've come up with is trying to tag on to some one-time events, a fair, a 5K run, art festivals. I think Chris mentioned those. You know, something that really resonates with your community where your office might be, can give you a lot of awareness and a lot of recognition. If there's a signature event in your town, I would consider, if you're not involved, maybe getting more involved in those things. If you can't do anything else, that's a huge opportunity to do that. You know, then there's also with the corporate side, there's obviously ongoing events. I'm sure maybe some of you have concert series in your local parks, the community theater. There's a lot of minor league baseball teams around the state. They certainly can provide some relatively inexpensive ways for you to promote your brand. And a lot of people see those throughout the months or however long the season might be for those teams. Certainly charity involvement's important to the degree, again, that your finances will allow. People like to see companies that are in their communities involved in charitable events. And I think that's becoming an increasingly important thing. And I'll touch on that later from an employee perspective as well. And certainly your local chambers of commerce, your business, if your portfolio includes some commercial opportunities, it can be important to connect with your local chamber of commerce as well. Next slide.
Randy, I think that we actually wanted to let people know that these strategies can apply to any size company. I think that's something we didn't mention at the start, but it's worth mentioning now that, like you keep mentioning, that, you know, depending on the money you have to put into some of these opportunities, certainly any different size carrier in Pennsylvania could take a lot of this information and use it based on the type of money they have to invest in these programs. So
correct.
Just wanted to let people know that before we went on.
Yep. It's all relative to scale, Vaughn. You know, I think there's opportunities out there for all kinds of various levels of commitment and of opportunities to get the name out there. You know, one of the things that we've historically done at Donegal, and Chris mentioned to it in his presentation, is this co-op concept with your agents where you share some costs. You know, you partner with a local agent. who may know the community, who may know the hot buttons, or, you know, in certain communities it may be a billboard, in certain communities it may be the local radio station. But I would encourage you to, again, to the degree you can, to engage your distribution system at a local level as to what they think gets the biggest bang for the buck there. You know, share the cost if you can, again, depending on relative size. Support your agents in that way. I also think whatever you do, and again, Chris mentioned it earlier, is have a strategy. Have an idea of what you're trying to accomplish, and have some steps in the process along the way. Again, if you just throw something out without consistency or without thought, and you don't show that consistency in different things that you do, people will see that and see, well, these guys don't seem to have their act together because this ad looked this way and this logo was different than this logo. I think subliminally people capture images and visions the same time after time after time, right? The old adage, you have to hear something 7 times before it resonates with you. So, and to the other thing I would say is, if you are driving it as a sales tool, you know, try and set some measurable goals as to what you're trying to achieve throughout all these different activities that you may do in your community or with your agency partners. Next slide. And really my last slide from my perspective is this employee engagement idea. We're all dealing, or maybe a lot of us are dealing with millennials in their workforce and their employee base. And millennials want to work for an organization that is involved in their community. You know, I hear constantly about they want to be involved in something bigger than themselves. So, you know, we're encouraging our employees in some of our community things to get involved, to be at the tent, to participate in the 5K run, to do those things because they enjoy being part of the community and they want their company involved in charitable giving and in community events. I think it's important. We all have in our local towns, as I said earlier, key events, and I think it's important that we sponsor those to the degree we can, and that, again, that we have our employees involved. It's great when I have, you know, at a 5K run and I'm there handing out stuff, but we have an underwriter there, and maybe we even have somebody from our policy services department. They're engaged and they want to talk to people. It makes people feel good about their company as well. So I would encourage you, if you do get involved in some community things, encourage your employees to be involved as well, not just the management team or the marketing staff. Pull everybody in and make them all feel like this is part of a positive thing the company is doing for the community. So, and next slide, and I think Chris is going to jump back in here quick.
Thanks, Randy.
Yep.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with Randy's last point in terms of getting as many people in the company as involved as you possibly can. Again, I'm making some assumptions here, but I would guess that most of us don't have thousands and thousands of employees working for us. Speaking for my company, we have about 110, a little north of that maybe, people. So when we do events, particularly if they're proximate to Philadelphia, where most of our folks work, we try to get everybody involved. So we did a music festival last year just across the river in Camden. We're going to do it again this year. We had more representatives from outside the marketing department kind of working our booth and handing out our stuff and spinning the wheel and engaging with the public than we did people that were actually part of the marketing team. So IT folks, service folks, people in our admin team, everybody from the folks that answer our phones at the receptionist desk, right up to, you know, kind of senior members of our senior leadership team. So active participation in all things, whether they're big events like a music fest, or, you know, we do things philanthropic things like participating and devoting our time to Ronald McDonald House and Phil Abundance, which is a food bank organization here in Philly, and some of the other things that we do. But getting as many diverse department people involved, it also builds a bit of an esprit de corps within your own company. So again, I couldn't agree more with Randy's point on that. So we're getting down to the end of this. All of the planning is great, all of the strategizing, if you're doing surveys or you're kind of focusing on your millennial reach or your SEO or any of this other stuff, but none of it means anything if you don't execute. So it starts with creating those strong relationships with the folks that really know this stuff. Sometimes you do have to spend a few extra bucks, like we did. We're engaging with Finch, which is our branding company here. But don't think you know it all, because you don't. And it's amazing how people, when you engage with them, are willing to share a fair amount of information without running the without running the clock on you. So don't be shy about reaching out and asking questions and getting to those people, particularly in the area of media and communications. That some of us, I'm a 57-year-old guy, so there's a lot of stuff out there that's new that I don't know. So I try to surround myself with smart people and people that are different than me to get good ideas. Obviously, as Randy mentioned, also build a budget focused on as much high impact stuff as you possibly can, and be able to commit those resources to unearth those local marketing opportunities. Again, all three areas are included there. And then, getting into identifying those real true partner agents. And one of the things that I always talk to our field marketing people about when we're talking about working with agents or considering a new agent or whatever, we use the phrase partners a lot, because we don't necessarily want to be on every street corner, but we do want to work with folks that we consider to be meet our definition of partner. And that is, when you're in a partnership relationship, you have your partner's interests on par with your own. And if you work with each other in that kind of a fashion, both partners will win. But again, finding out who those folks are and then getting them to commit. As Randy mentioned earlier, sometimes you can get folks to participate both with people and resources, and but they don't have a lot of dough to throw into the sponsorship, so you may have to bear the lion's share or a disproportionate share of the whatever it is, the cost for the booth or the cost for the ad or the cost for the SEO thing that you might want to do jointly together. But you got to secure a commitment and have some skin in the game, I think. But anyway, that's us. We got to make sure we've got ourselves committed. The other thing is you got to be flexible and realistic, because sometimes you just got to, kind of reboot and reload and adjust as you go. And if you focused on those things that I spoke of and Randy spoke of, it's not like making a commitment to an advertising campaign with, ABC or CBS over the next 12 months. These are local things that you can adjust quickly, and flexibility and being realistic about what you can get out of it. Like CEO always asks, so what's our return on investment here, Chris? And that's always an uncomfortable conversation, because it's hard to measure it exactly in terms of dollars spent and new policies written. What we can, there are measurements out there that you can employ.
Chris, we did actually get that question that came in, and you're answering it right now, but I just want to make sure that everybody knew that question came in about how you measure the success of a branding campaign. And I'm sure that you guys are through that process right now. So that is a question that's on a lot of people's minds. So if we could take some extra time to, address that and what people can do to measure that success, that'd be great.
Sure. I don't want to steal the second part of this, which is Randy's going to talk about the partner action items. But on the company side, and Joe Morris, thanks for the question. It's a tough one because it's not marketing and advertising and all of this brand recognition and brand promotion stuff that we're talking about. It's kind of a slow burn, and it takes a while to build. as I said, you can't immediately identify dollar spent at festival equals dollar of premium in the door. But there are indications, there are signs. For instance, we noticed that after our festival last year, and actually during the festival, the folks that actually came to our public website spiked fairly significantly, actually. And we could see that and measure that because we've got the analytics that sits behind our website to count, how many visitors, unique visitors, time spent, that kind of stuff. So there's some metrics that you can put in place, Joe, to measure the success of a campaign. But as I often try to remind Bob Whitlock, our president and CEO, it's like growing a carrot. You can't pull a carrot up every 5 minutes and see if it's growing. Sometimes you got to just stick the carrot in the earth and let it grow. Knowing that if you're watering it and fertilizing it and giving it the right attention, that over time it's gonna work. So it's kind of a squishy answer to the how do you measure success, but honestly, when you're in this space, a lot of it is squishy, and a lot of it is intuitive. Sorry if I gobbled up too much time, Randy. I'm going to pivot over to you.
That's okay.
I had a question actually for you, Chris, before you finish. Sure. I wanted to know if you guys saw any results from your new website and your new name, if that led to any spikes in people just visiting your website and interacting with your company that way.
Yeah, actually, significant. Our old website, like a lot of old dusty insurance company websites, was essentially an electronic billboard that didn't do much. So we drove a lot of new functionality into it. We never gave potential independent agents a way to contact us if they were interested in representing us. Now we have, if you want to becoming an agent on our site. I've gotten some tremendous opportunities for new agents out of that. Now it's away from the customer thing, but it's certainly a positive result of that. We never had a get a quote feature on our old website that now sits prominently on our landing page. We launched the new site a little over a year ago. It was kind of coincided with the launch of our new brand. I've had over 1,000 people come to our website looking for a quote, which we immediately turn around and drive out to our independent agents. So I guess the fact that we launched the brand, launched the new website, started engaging in all of these, this three-pronged approach, all of that stuff has had a significant impact on our website visitors. And I'm not going to brag about company numbers here, but we've had a enormous growth in our business in terms of new business over the last 2 years, and even more so last year. And all of that came after we went down this path of launching the new brand and launching the new website. So it does work. Randy?
Yeah, I would agree with Chris. It is a mushy conversation on activity unless your agents, after they're involved in something, are specifically asking every inquiry, how did you hear about us? Where did you hear about our agency? And even that's not probably statistically relevant long term. We tell our agents when we're involved in a co-op discussion is you've got to commit to this for a couple of years, to that drip kind of marketing that Chris mentioned. And if you throw an ad out and 30 days later the phone's not ringing, you've set an expectation that's unrealistic for your agents. So it is a tough call when our senior management says what's the cost benefit analysis of hosting a 5K run or sponsoring a little league team. It's kind of I look at it as kind of a cost of doing business, right? If you want to be in this business, you've got to let people know what you do. So that's part of it. And just to wrap this up, I think Chris covered a lot of this area, particularly on the agency side, but I think it's really understanding your customers and knowing which agents you want to work with, which agents have the ability to do what you're trying to do to achieve the goals you're trying to achieve. Or, as we said here, who are committed to a special or unique relationship with your company. That's key, because if they want to do business with you, they'll find a way to make it happen. You know, we've touched on a lot of these other, you know, make sure the agency people are engaged in the local events. You know, and again, make it a joint thing. You know, you want the agency brand to grow as well if you're working with your local agents. Because I always tell our agents, let's co-brand, because they know you, and then when you present Donegal, they know Donegal because they've seen an ad that has both of our logos on it, and it begins to resonate with the consumer that, oh, this isn't somebody I've never heard of before, right? When you give a quote, when an agent gives a quote for a company, sometimes you'll hear that, well, who are these people? I've never heard of them. So again, this is all kind of wrapped up in that brand awareness and getting to know who it is. But I think from the agency partner side, it's picking and choosing who are the guys, the agencies that are really committed to your company. Again, regardless of size, who is committed, and they're the ones you want to work with. And we all have them, and we all know who they are. So I would encourage our friends on the call to, you know, really understand your distribution customers and where you want to grow and who you want to grow with, and work together with them. So, and as Chris's as the last point says, execute on it. That's the key to all this. So with that, I'm done, Vaughn. If anybody has any questions, we can open it up for questions.
Yeah, and then, I mean, if anyone has any questions, we got two great people right here, right now on the line to answer any questions that you might have on anything that has to do with the marketing. And I wanted to go back to what Chris had said about the website. I know that we talked about a lot of outward facing marketing about, you know, getting involved in your community and purchasing billboards and traditional advertising, but there's something about connecting with a younger generation, millennials, who are going to be your people who will be buying policies in the future. All that outward marketing is great, but if they get to your website and there's no way for them to get the information they need, you're going to lose people right away. I mean, I just went through this process myself, purchasing homeowners insurance, auto insurance, and I found that the companies that I wanted to do business with were the easiest to get information from. So, you know, I see these billboards because I live in Harrisburg for, you know, all the companies in the area, and I'll go to their website, and the person who has the best information and who makes it the easiest for me to get the information I need is the person that I'm going to end up doing business with. And I think that in the long run, that's going to be what it really takes to be successful with younger people buying policies. I don't know if Chris or Randy agree, but just from what I've experienced, I think that that's going to be very important. So building and creating a website to get information to people isn't as difficult as people might think. The hardest part is just to get that startup, to get it initially going. But
Yep.
Once you have a website, it's more just tailoring things to what you know works and what you know doesn't, so that you can give your policyholders information they need, especially people who already do business with your company, just making sure that they can come back to your website and use you as a resource. You know, if they're preparing for winter and a snowy season, you know, what are things that they should do at their house to prepare, you know, to avoid losses. So, and things like that, I think are really crucial as part of your marketing strategy, just to get people in the door and to keep them as your policyholders.
I would agree. I think interactive websites, informational websites, you know, in today's world, when somebody asks you a question, what's the first response typically? Well, let me Google it, right? So they're doing that research. So I think the more interactive and the more engaging your websites can be, again, to the degree that your budget allows, it's an opportunity for you to tell your story about what you do and how you do it. And as to Vaughn's point, educate people and provide them information, tell them why they should do business with you. So it's a good point, Vaughn. I think more and more it's all happening in our hands, right, with our little technology. So anything else?
Chris, were you going to answer the question that came in?
Yeah, I just was doing that now. Thank you, Joe. The question was, how did we select Finch, and can I give a rough range of the cost of their branding development work? We created a pretty extensive request for proposal, sent it out to maybe a dozen different branding companies, some Philadelphia area based, some outside of our area. Got it down to 6 finalists, and then took those 6 finalists down to 2, and then made a final call. It was about a $50,000 investment. They did, I mean, a lot of stuff, and that number is a little squishy. That's just a ballpark. You can spend less, you can spend a heck of a lot more. I think actually when it's all in, it was probably closer to 75, because we got connected with a website developer that helped us take our ideas and turn them into reality. But I mean, this is all doable, I think, for most of us. And know that the investment that you make today is one that you reap benefits, you know, for years, if you do it right.
Were there any difficulties that you experienced when choosing a contractor like that, or anything that you might want to warn people about?
I guess what you're really asking me is at the end with the last 2, what pushed one over the other, maybe. I mean, look, we've had proposals that were, you know, 300, 400,000, you know, we always laugh them out of the room. And actually the more expensive proposals were actually some of the least impressive proposals. Some of the guys that are just, you know, and as we ended up with this company called Finch Brands, and coincidentally, they happen to be right here in Philadelphia. So that made working with them a little bit easier in terms of getting together for regular meetings. But yeah, you know, everybody's going to give you brand name companies that they do work for. You know, oh, I do work for Procter & Gamble. I do work for IBM. I do work for, you know, American Airlines, whatever. Well, that's because these big companies dole out little projects to, you know, a whole bunch of different branding and advertising and promotional type companies, where the lion's share of their money is spent with somebody that's other than the one that's giving you that name on their bio or during their presentation. So this was critically important for us. We hadn't rebranded in 265 years. So we went through a very painstaking process with a CEO who was exceptionally cost conscious. And we still pulled it off, I think, without sounding too boastful, with, I think, pretty good success.
Good.
Well, I think that's all we have time for our presenters here today. Everyone who was in attendance today will be receiving an email with the presentation and the slides from today. And also, there will be contact information for Chris and Randy in case anybody has any questions about anything we went through today, you know, choosing a contractor to work on your branding, the 3 steps that we talked about. We really appreciate Randy and Chris taking the time to present to our membership, and their insights are very welcome and valuable. And thanks everybody for attending. If you have any questions, you can contact me after. We will be continuing our webinar series in June. We will be talking about international tax considerations with Mazars. You should get some information on that in your email inboxes soon. But we also want to thank again our Premium Gold sponsors for making these events possible throughout the year. And so thanks everybody for attending, and we'll see you guys in June.